So first things first, obviously nothing is concrete or has been confirmed yet between Gachiakuta's connection with Fire Force or Soul Eater. And as someone who's been making Fire Force content for a while now and have been trying to tell people how Soul Eater and Fire Force were connected for the longest, I feel like the coincidences between Gachiakuta, Soul Eater, and Fire Force, if you could call them that, should not be overlooked. This might be a connection, or this just might be a coincidence, call it whatever you like, but it's still fun to talk about. So when we look at Gachiakuta and then we take a look at Soul Eater, there's something very prevalent between the two, and it's the fact that weapons take the main focus in terms of both of their power systems. Jin Ki from Gachiakuta and demon weapons from Soul Eater. But it just doesn't boil down to the simple fact that both of these series use weapons, but it's also the fact that these same weapons require strong bonds, connections, and also have something to do with the soul. Soul Eater is obviously about people having connections with each other, and the connection between a Meister and their weapon plays a major part in their power system. When we look at Gachiakuta, it is almost the same thing, but rather it's about a janitor's connection with their object, or whatever it may be that they cherish. And whatever object they might cherish will then become a Jinki. When we look at the first page of Gachiakuta, it is said that soul dwells in things that are cherished. Then what dwells in trash that has been discarded? In Soul Eater, it is said that a sound soul dwells within a sound mind and a sound body. But in Gachiakuta, what if you took this same body and that body just so happened to be trash? What would dwell inside of it? And to that I say, obviously nothing good. But to get back on track, I think at this point the similarities between Gachiakuta and Soul Eater are pretty obvious, especially when Gachiakuta is almost directly quoting Soul Eater. Again, like I said about the power system when the weapons take the main focus, if you cherish something for a long time, a soul will dwell in it. That connection that you have with your weapon will make both you and that same weapon, that same Jinki, stronger. And that Jinki would eventually develop a soul. Now, what would be the more pro-efficient version of this? What if that same weapon already had a soul, and you formed a connection with that soul that already existed in that weapon? That would essentially give you a soul resonance. Now, when we look at Fire Force and we look at the birth of Excalibur, Arthur says, I guess it's true that a weapon bound with strong feelings would have a soul. This is literally the same exact concept of a Jinki from Gachiakuta. If you have strong feelings for an object, it would eventually get a soul. Now I just want to make sure everybody is following me. Again, we said if you cherish something for a long time, a soul will dwell in it. Well, what just happened with Excalibur? Arthur literally said it himself. I guess it's true that a weapon bound with strong feelings would have a soul. Now this brings into question, would this mean that Excalibur is the first Jinki? Because Excalibur is not like any other demon weapon. He is made from the same concept of a Jinki. You're having strong emotions and strong feelings, and you form a connection with an object, and that object eventually gets a soul. But with a demon weapon, they basically took this process and cheated. Rather than you developing a strong desire and bond with your weapon and it eventually developing a soul, they took human beings and made them weapons. In Soul Eater, Death says, a weapon is power. Everyone knows that. Great strength is born when such a weapon is touched by a soul, almost like a Jinki. And then Death says, so the weapons needed to be changed into something that could commune with the soul. But this was not the case with Excalibur, because he is more or less like a Jinki rather than a demon weapon because of his bond with Arthur. Now this really makes me question where exactly would Gachiakuta be when it comes to the Fire Force and Soul Eater timeline. I can't really say for certain, but it's a lot to think about, especially when you think that there's a possibility that Excalibur could have been the first Jinki. Honestly, I could see Gachiakuta really being the basis of everything that is established in Soul Eater. It just really brings the question, what exactly happened to Shinra and everyone in Fire Force for everything to happen like this. There's not very much information for me to go off of when you take into consideration that Gachiakuta is still relatively a new manga, but I'd still like to point out the fact that the similarities between Gachiakuta Fire Force and Soul Eater are still very staggering. The janitors are really no different than the Meisters from Soul Eater, and the organization that they run when it comes to exterminating beasts is very similar to DWMA. And this is not including the similarities it actually has with Fire Force when it comes to perception. What defines an object as trash? What does it mean when somebody sees something as trash, but another man sees it as his own treasure? It's similar to how in Fire Force, they're defining people and they're trying to define Shinra for who he was, referring to him as a demon based on their own warped perception of him. It's the same concept here, but rather than people, they're objects. But it still does actually happen to people in Gachiakuta. We just haven't seen it to the degree of Fire Force yet. After all, we literally see people get thrown away like they are trash in Gachiakuta. And it's all about perception. Somebody could really cherish their Jin Ki to a point to where it would have a soul in it, but based on my own perception, I could define that same Jin Ki as trash. But then that really brings the question, what makes something trash? And just like Fire Force, when you compare these upper echelon-esque sky dwellers that reside in Gachiakuta to the Holy Soul Temple, they are virtually the same thing. They all have a warped and misguided perception, and just like Fire Force, they just so happen to be the filthy ones. And these questions are why I'm so invested in this series. Now when it comes to this series being connected with Fire Force and Soul Eater, despite there not being too much evidence, nothing concrete yet, I still feel like there is a connection between these three series. I kind of feel like this is going to be the start of other mangakas that worked under Okubo contributing to a much bigger verse. Could this possibly be what Soul World actually is? I don't know for certain, and only time will tell, just like what happened with Fire Force and Soul Eater's connections. Only time will tell whether or not all these connections are real. Would you really boil these down to inspiration and coincidences? There's a possibility that this could just be inspiration, but clearly there is a nod or two there to Okubo's previous series, even if it isn't connected. But if it is connected, I feel like this is going to be the start of something very grand in the manga industry. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Is this simply inspiration, or do you think that something more ambitious is going on behind the scenes? Please let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.